Hello and welcome to this presentation on enhancing learning during mobility for outgoing exchange students. This project was undertaken in conjunction with colleagues at the Chemie Business School, Donal Palchik, Assistant Dean International, and Robert Dalton, Educational Technologist. The project was funded under the 2019 Local Enhancement Projects funded by the National Forum.
International exchange has been a core feature of the Irish higher education system for some time. The benefits of international study have been shown to significantly positively impact on students' overall academic achievement. A strategic objective of the University of Limerick has been to ensure that every undergraduate student has the opportunity to engage in a relevant international learning experience over the course of their undergraduate study. As part of the Broadening Horizons strategic plan from 2015 to 2019, an increase of 30% in the number of UL students undertaking outgoing international exchange was set. The Chemie Business School surpassed this target by quite some margin. So prior to 2017, we would have had on average 30 to 50 students undertaking outgoing exchange on either study abroad or Erasmus each year. But over the course of 2015 to 2019, this increased threefold to over 100 to upwards of 120 students undertaking international exchange in those years. As a result of the significant increasing numbers, a number of operational challenges began to emerge, which could impact the extent to which students were getting the optimum learning experience that they potentially could from the international exchange that they were undertaking. These challenges included things like ensuring that we were matching students with the appropriate and correct partner and ensuring that students were well prepared for the semester abroad that they were about to undertake. At the institutional level, the International Education Office provides a broad range of supports to students undertaking outgoing exchange, while at the faculty level, the role of the Academic Exchange Coordinator is crucial. During my time as Academic Exchange Coordinator, the number of students undertaking outgoing exchange rose significantly. And as part of that time, I noticed a number of trends emerging with some students. Those tended to be an inability to assimilate in the first couple of weeks of undertaking their international exchange placement, a failure to adjust significantly to the learning environment abroad, and that resulting in sometimes a failure to meet the academic expectations set out at the partner institution. With almost 80 partners at the University of Limerick, the type of learning experiences that students will encounter can vary significantly. And while there may be some similarities between the University of Limerick and the way things are done at a partner institution, there can also be quite significant differences. Therefore, in reviewing the kind of difficulties that the students were having, we identified that there were particular interventions that we could make that may help them to improve their potential of having a better learning experience. These included things like improving the student partner institution matching process, providing greater support during their induction phase at the partner institution, and using techniques to try and reinforce student learning, particularly through peer-to-peer approaches while they were on their exchange placement. Having identified the kind of issues and interventions that we felt could be beneficial to students, in September of 2019, we applied to the Local Enhancement Project Grants Fund in order to secure funding to develop what we refer to as the ELM project, the Enhancement of Learning During Mobility project. In effect, the central aim of this ELM project was the creation of an interactive online platform dedicated to outgoing exchange students in the business school. Effectively, what the site would do was bring together a range of information sources and supports that already exist within the university, which were in some ways fragmented for students to locate and sort through, bring those into a central repository in a business school site where we could also communicate with students as a group while they were undertaking their international exchange in various different partners. This allowed us to have a clearer vision of the steps required for successful completion of the exchange semester and to communicate these with students, helping to guide them through the process more effectively. We also provided through this supports which would equip students to flourish in a more global environment. And effectively as well, it provided a mechanism through which to enhance the ability of the academic coordinator to be able to connect with the students and direct them towards the relevant supports where necessary. So, for example, supports that already existed through IED or through student counselling or through disability services. So, the central aim of the ELM Information Hub was to provide a central repository of information for those students and also allow for two-way communication other than through what was mainly used up to that point, which was simply an email exchange through coordinators and students. To provide some structure to the ELM site, we broke it down into three distinct blocks or phases. The pre-mobility phase, where we focused on things like partner suitability, learning-related factors, and personal-related factors associated with undertaking outgoing exchange. The second block was focusing on the during mobility phase, where we wanted to ensure that students maintained interaction with other University of Limerick students as well as meeting new students abroad, maintaining their links with UL and supporting them with administrative tasks. And finally, in the post-mobility phase, we wanted to ensure that students were reflecting on their experience of learning abroad. We want to be able to ensure that they can undertake a cultural assessment to determine that how they have changed during their period of academic exchange, reflecting on how they now may be more culturally aware. And we also wanted to focus on ensuring that any students who had a credit deficit on returning from Erasmus or study abroad had a mechanism through which to formalise that completion of the credits. So the pre-mobility phase focused on ensuring that students were accessing a central repository of information. This meant that we wanted to ensure students were following up with information sources already available to them on key information about the partner institution that they planned to attend, and also ensuring that they were consulting and reading Erasmus reports of previous students who had undertaken placement at that institution. Whilst this advice would always have been provided in the past to students, it was difficult often to ascertain whether students had actually delved into that information to the fullest possible extent. So through short e-activities, we wanted to ensure that students were demonstrating that they had actually engaged with that information, posing questions like, for example, had they familiarised themselves with academic calendars? Were they familiar with the semesterisation approach at a particular institution? This also aided ensuring that students were maintaining a sense of collaboration with those other students who were planning to attend an institution abroad, be that the same institution that those students would go to or another institution but in a similar geographic location. Planning and researching the exchange process meant not just knowing information about the particular institution, but being very aware of how an individual might deal with things like financial constraints while being abroad, understanding how things like the student mobility grant worked, and also ensuring that they were ready for any personal setbacks that they might face while on exchange. A crucial part of the pre-mobility phase was developing connections with other students who were also going abroad at the same time. Again, while we would always have encouraged that students would have informally met up with each other, that they would have contacted each other in advance of exchange, we would have had no way of actually ensuring that that happened other than to formally encourage the students to do so. This provided us a much more structured and easy mechanism to make sure that those informal connections were happening, where previously we would only have had the use of email exchanges with students and the coordinator to try and create those introductions. This allowed a much more constructive virtual space in order to allow students make those introductions and develop those initial conversations with peers. During my time as academic exchange coordinator, I noticed that when students had problems adjusting to their new site and location of study, it was typically in the first 3 to 5 weeks that problems developed. And it was during that crucial period that students either decided to continue with their placement or in actual fact to leave their placement and return to the University of Limerick early. As a result of that, we included in the During Mobility section a very clear set of activities to ensure that students were supporting each other during this period. Again, sharing things like with their experiences that they were having abroad, making sure that they were maintaining contact with information from the University of Limerick, and having that sense of moral support amongst each other, seeing that they weren't alone in the kinds of difficulties that they were experiencing. One of the things we undertook to do as well was to ask previous students to record some stories of the kind of problems that they encountered while they were on exchange. So, for example, we had one student who had undertaken an exchange placement in Hong Kong during the period of the Hong Kong riots. He recorded a short introduction to how he dealt with those particular issues. And we felt this was the kind of information that students could quickly benefit from looking at and seeing how other students coped in similar situations where there was a crisis event or where they simply had problems adjusting to their new environment. The final post-mobility phase is undertaken once students are actually returned to the University of Limerick and have completed their Erasmus or study abroad period. We wanted to use this phase to encourage students to really deeply reflect on their personal learning experience abroad. The QS World University Rankings Global Employer Survey report revealed that 60% of employers said that they would actually give extra credit to an applicant with international study abroad experience. So as part of this process, we want students not just to complete their Erasmus or study abroad report, but to really reflect on how their experience can enhance the quality of their CV and enhance the quality of their applications as graduates. To do this, we also wanted to capture any change in their cultural awareness from their pre-mobility to their post-mobility period. And we planned to do this through the use of verified survey tools, which would allow us to capture that change in cultural awareness in the student. And again, the student would have access to that information and be able to reflect on the changes that they had experienced. Finally, one critical point of the post-mobility site is to allow us to address any gaps in completion. It would be relatively rare, but not unheard of, for a student to have insufficient credits on returning from their Erasmus or international exchange mobility. So, for example, depending on the number of credits abroad that they had taken, they might be short 3 or 6 credits. And as a result, this would be something that we need to ensure are made up to allow for sufficient progression through the system. Again, prior to having the ELM site, the only way this could be captured was through the setting of assignments, which would then be completed by students and would be submitted through email or hard copy to the lecturer. This provided a much more streamlined approach to ensuring that assignments were undertaken and completed in the appropriate amount of time by the student, and that we had a better tracking mechanism to ensure that there were no gaps in completion that potentially might go unidentified up to the final 4th year of a student's programme. Unfortunately, one of the problems that we encountered with the ELM project was the onset of COVID-19. We had a very high number of students that we had interviewed for their placements, and placements were arranged in the autumn of 2019. And unfortunately, with the onset of COVID in 2020, those students were unable to undertake their exchange placement in autumn of 2020 as a result of many partner institutions pulling their Erasmus programs, or students being encouraged to only undertake that Erasmus exchange period on a virtual basis. As a result, we look forward to rolling out the full ELM project in the future when we have a return to full mobility between campuses again.
I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation today, and if you'd like to hear more about the ELM project, please feel free to contact me on caroline.murphy@ul.ie.